you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe.
We're back to the podcasting space, folks. Back from the retail mines. Though I like my job, it is a mine. It is the sweatshop of the Walmart. So, working hard, feeling exhausted. Allergies are going horribly. Summer has not been kind to me. My body's exhausted. 30 to 40 orders a day, standing in the rain sometimes. But I'm back. Your boy's back. I'm sorry for the long wait. I had to push back the episode I talked about previously, the Lego Star Wars 2 review. I would like to get to that again, but right now, I just saw Spider-Man Brand New Day, and it forced me to get back into the podcasting booth. I lost some recordings, so I decided, why not have a segment where you see my face before we jump to the B-roll footage and the actual review. So, this movie has some big shoes to fill. It's got to compete with No Way Home, which brought back my favorite Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, for live action. It brought the incredible Andrew Garfield back. It brought back William Dafoe, who was doing absolutely incredible. It's got some big shoes to fill. You know, the character arc of Peter finally coming to his head with Aunt May's death. That was something I really liked about the previous movie. It moved stuff forward. It felt like it was actually giving Peter a character arc. For context, Spider-Man means a lot to me. He means a lot to me as a character. I grew up with the original Steve Ditko comic book run. I had, I think, 12 issues. Had ones about the Lizard, Doc Ock, Electro, Sandman, and whatever villains they had during that beginning portion. And Peter was a much more resentful guy. He was antisocial. He was frustrated. He had a chip on his shoulder. But he always ended up doing the right thing, regardless of what happened. He learned his lesson about what happens when you be selfish and, you know, you say, oh, look at me. Look at how cool I am. Look at how good I am. I'm going to capitalize on my talents and, you know, make money off of my powers. And, you know, I don't care about the world. He literally says the world can go hang besides my aunt and uncle. He says that. He's not a, like, he is a responsible, respectable guy, but the problem is he's very selfish, though. He's very selfish. He does the right thing is what I'm trying to say, but he's very selfish, very self-centered. He only really cares about his small little support group with Aunt May and such, and the couple girlfriends he has, and later on Harry, and that's about all he cares about. You know, as time goes on, he starts becoming more compassionate, more understanding, and more respectable, and he grows up to be a fine, good man. Not a good man, but a man of good character, a man of good principles. And I liked Tobey Maguire's first starting him out as a man with good principles. You know, he was an awkward kid. He had he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder with the whole, you know, Uncle Ben trying to be his father, and he was getting mad at him and being frustrated, but he was bullied. He was a loser. Nobody liked him. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is endearing, responsible, caring, empathetic. He's the guy who's the nerd who realistically would never get the girl, and that is the perfect part about him. Spider-Man animated series. He's a perfect, that is my favorite version of the character from the 90s cartoon specifically. He's mature. He's charismatic to a degree. He's still a nerd, but he's respectable. He cares. He's funny. He's quippy. He's funny. He makes a lot of jokes. puns and quips and all that. He's well written, and he sells the emotional moments perfectly. Christopher Daniel Barnes does, and the animation looks incredible. The theme song's iconic. Everything about it's amazing. 90s Spider-Man, I implore you to watch it. The first season is incredible. The second season's also really good. Third season. It's a great show. Seriously, if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you are doing yourself a disservice if you haven't watched Spider-Man the Animated Series. Christopher Daniel Barnes gives the right warmth, the heart, the pizzazz, the charisma, the sarcasm, and the weight of being the character. He's the perfect version of the character. And so many of the movies, including this one, borrow from Spider-Man the Animated Series. It changed the entire Venom storyline with the whole symbiote having negative traits. It came from the 90s cartoon, straight up. That's how good it is. Spider-Man Noir, not the Nicolas Cage one, but the Shattered Dimensions and across not the Spider-Verse one. The Shattered Dimensions and comic book version of Spider-Man Noir is incredible. I love his personality. Christopher Daniel Barnes yet again did that voice, and he made him intimidating, gritty, but he also made him responsible and still Spider-Man. But he was a more intense, grandiose, like epic version of Spider-Man who's darker and more interesting. Like those are the versions of the character that I gravitate towards. I also like Andrew Garfield a ton. Like he's absolutely incredible. He sells the emotion and frustrations of a guy who lost, his dad. He's frustrated, he's got daddy issues. His dad left him, his mom left him. So he's kind of dealing with the circumstances of that. And you can feel the weight of what he's going through. You understand why he isolates himself and he has a lot of problems. He also has charisma. He's also a well-written version of the character. He is an outcast at the beginning. They still kept that element true to what he was. Like all these elements work together in a way that just it's really good. Another great version of the character. I even like Spider-Man Unlimited. Spectacular Spider-Man's good, but it's a little rocky in its presentation. I don't really like the visual art style. I also don't really like the way Peter acts in regards to his romantic interests in the later seasons. He's kind of a dirtbag, but we'll get into that in another episode. So my problem with Tom Holland's Spider-Man at the beginning was he had no character arc. Homecoming and Far From Home, specifically, he's very stagnant and his problems are very surface level and they're not really deep at all. Like they're extremely surface level. For Homecoming, it's just a girl. He's having trouble with getting a girl to go to the dance with him to the homecoming. That's all he's thinking about throughout the entire movie when it comes to, I have a choice between going to a couple parties and like eating candy with people, or I have a choice of being responsible and actually saving people's lives. Like, in my opinion, of all the conflicts you could introduce, that's what you go for. Like, Peter Parker's the opposite of that. He's not a party goer. He's the guy sitting over there with the chemistry set. Well, everyone's like, what the heck are you doing, you nerd? Like, why aren't you with us at the party? Like, are you too like lame for it? You're lame, you suck. I like that nerdy element where it's like, oh, he's a nerd. He's unabashedly a nerd. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not cool. He's just saying, this is who I am. I love science. I love computers. I love technology. Like, he's not in that I want to be at the party phase. He wants to date girls. He wants to maybe, expand his circle in that area, but he doesn't succeed. A lot of times he fails. But with Tom Holland, I don't care. Like in that area, I don't care. He has one moment in that movie where a brick wall drops on him and he does a really good, emotional job of acting. And I think he's good as Spider-Man in terms of his acting. The problem is the movies he's put in aren't very good to me. The first two, the first one is literally just it's completely the opposite of what Spider-Man is about. And for me, that's just it doesn't sell it for me. He doesn't sell it for me in that movie because the writing holds him back. He has to be saved by Tony Stark all the time. He has to be babied by him. He can't face a threat by himself. He has to be made a suit to help him fight crime. He has to be made an AI to help him fight crime. He has to call Tony when stuff gets bad. He has to have him come in and swoop in and save the day. He never proved himself in that movie. Michael Keaton's Vulture is incredible. He's a great villain, but he's got motivation. He's not correct in what he's doing, but you can see like he's obviously a villain. Michael Keaton's Vulture is, but you can see his frustration with Tony Stark and all that stuff. But the Tony Stark connection, no thank you. Far From Home was basically the same thing, just with better action. The second half is entertaining to watch. I won't deny. I enjoyed the little Spider-Man noir reference with the black costume, with the night monkey, which was cringy that they called him the night monkey. But it continued the tone of this is just slapstick. That's all this is. Essentially, he's going on a road trip to London. He wants to take a break from being Spider-Man. He wants to kiss the girl. He wants to hang with his friends. He wants to enjoy his time. Nick Fury, it's cool that he's in it, but he's a Skrull, which was really weird. For some reason, they had to tie it into Captain Marvel, even though nobody liked that movie for the most part. And that's sad because Miss Marvel's actually a good character, but the conflict was not very interesting. I liked Mysterio. That was cool. Peter having to outsmart Mysterio and defeat him and fight his illusions, and him getting hit by the trains was an emotional arc. It's like, oh, this kid's getting, psychologically tormented. The problem is it centers around Iron Man. Like, there are solid moments in Far From Home. It's not a bad movie. Homecoming is to me, but Far From Home has moments of promise, even though I don't think it's my favorite Spider-Man movie by any means. But it's still, like, I'm glad it exists, but no, Homecoming I could erase. I'm just being honest. I don't think Far From Home is very good. Like, me saying I'm glad it exists is not necessarily a compliment. It's like, oh, I'm glad you exist, but I still don't think you're very good, like, at all. I think there you have your moments. It's definitely better than Homecoming, but that's not saying much. Mysterio was good. The conflict was interesting, where Spider-Man had to learn how to outsmart Mysterio and all that stuff. But the whole conflict with school stuff is just boring. I don't relate to it. I never thought, because the thing is, Peter Parker's relatable because he doesn't get the girl. He doesn't get what he wants. He helps people and he helps people because he wants to, be good. He doesn't get anything out of it. And that's what makes him relatable, or not even relatable. That's what makes him a good character, a good role model is, he doesn't get rewarded for doing good. Usually a lot of times he's hated despite the fact that he does it. Like, you don't have everyone giving you recognition, I'll say. And when it's not about what you receive, it's what you give. If you receive anything, then it's a blessing from God. I believe in God. I believe in Christ. So I whenever you get anything, it doesn't matter what it is, for doing something good, it's a blessing. But the thing is, his character has no arc. There's no moment where he grows up. In Far From Home, he still has that childlike innocence. He still has that naivety. He still has that he still has that wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, oh, life's so great and blah blah blah, and I want to talk to girls and all this stuff. It's like, buddy, we all want to. Us men, we all want to do that. But there's a difference. We don't necessarily, that's not all we think about. We think about other things. We have hobbies, we have a family, we have friends, like other friends other than the girl. Like that's the core fundamental problem with this is, and then No Way Home comes out. But the core problem is he's not Spider-Man in those movies. He's not even Peter Parker. He's Iron Boy Jr. He just is. I'm sorry. He genuinely is. I'm a purist of Spider-Man. To the day that I'm an old man ranting on the internet, I will say he was Iron Boy Jr. in those two movies. The second one, it was less offensive, and he was kind of getting out of the shadow slowly, which was nice. And it had enjoyable moments and elements. But it was just kind of like, where's he going as a character? No Way Home changed that all. It absolutely changed everything. It made everything absolutely incredible. First off, the stakes were raised. Everyone hates Spider-Man. He's on the back burner. His identity is exposed. Everything's falling apart, Crap's hit the fan. S.H.I.E.L.D. and all those people are arresting him. Law enforcement isn't letting him get away with what he's doing. Everything is just collapsing in front of him, and all he can do is try to hold on to the people he cares about. But the second he does, things start falling apart more. The more he drags them into this insane stuff, he does this irresponsible spell that, erases everyone's minds because he thinks that that's going to fix. Like he does a reckless spell with Doctor Strange to make it so certain people forget that he's Spider-Man, so it doesn't affect the lives of his friends, so they can go to college. The plot makes sense. But the thing is, why is Doctor Strange so reckless? Why is Spider-Man so reckless? How many times do you have to learn the same lessons over and over again where things don't work out when you want them to work out? Have you not learned the lesson that, with great power comes great responsibility? But it still worked because it's like, oh, he didn't learn that because freaking Uncle Ben is non-existent in this world for some strange reason. But this works, it's still a compelling setup. It's like, okay, we have a character arc here. It's fascinating. It's low-key irresponsible. It cost people a lot of problems. I mean, it caused people a lot of problems. And everyone from the multiverse is kind of coming in. You got Doc Ock, you got Green Goblin and Electro and Sandman and the Lizard. All these villains are coming back, iconic villains. Specifically William Dafoe. He's the one who stands out. He is outacting almost everyone in that entire movie. He's psychotic. He's insane. He mentally tries to manipulate Spider-Man and make his life terrible. These are incredible moments. They're absolutely amazing. Peter has to put up with the fact that his recklessness caused a massive problem. His irresponsibility caused so many problems. And the two Spider-Men that come back, freaking Tobey Maguire, absolutely amazing. Andrew Garfield, absolutely incredible. They come in and they mentor him. Tobey becomes the mentor, which he fits. He is the best live action Spider-Man to me. He comes in and he mentors them and says, you guys have a lot of insecurities. You have a lot of problems. But things can work out, things can be good. You don't have to be miserable or frustrated or depressed. You make sacrifices, but you also can have the life that you want to a degree. he mentors them and shows them that they don't have to be alone in the dark, or that they have to isolate themselves or treat themselves like they're bad or feel like failures. He's incredible in that movie. He's the glue that holds both of them together, because they'd fall apart without him. And that makes Peter grow. He grows because he sees Andrew Garfield struggle with losing Gwen, and he sees Tobey Maguire struggle with losing Harry and dealing with all those tragedies and helping Doc Ock, and he sees those tragedies, and he basically is like, okay, at the end, he basically is just like, these guys had their sacrifices. They had the tragedy. They had the tough life. Now it's time for me to right this wrong, to make a new spell to stop the multiverse from collapsing. So I want everyone to forget that I'm Spider-Man, or forget me and Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So Doctor Strange does it. Everyone forgets who he is, and that he's Spider-Man. And he has to deal with the consequences of his life being terrible. Like, not terrible, but it's a rough patch in life, you know? But he soldiers on and says, I'm not going to introduce myself to MJ. I'm not going to put her in danger. I'm not going to make her life tough. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be righteous by not being selfish and forcing myself into their lives when their lives are happy. They're happy now, and that's good. You know, it's not about me being happy. It's about them being happy. And that's something that was a powerful message. Like, it's about me shouldering the burden for them. And being okay with the fact that I can't always be there for them. And, you know, you can't always be there for people. You know, sometimes you got to go to work, you know, 5 days, like that's something that's relatable about it. Before we get into the review, this is a long preamble and I apologize, but I have to establish where I'm coming from with Spider-Man as a character, what he means to me. That's why he matters to me. That's why he's important. That's why he means so much to me, because, you know, sometimes, and Tom Holland's arc was incredible in that. But the last thing I'll say is, you know, you have to go to work sometimes. You can't always see your family. You can't always see your friends. And then you start to realize, well, if I'm at work, if I'm with these people, I need to help them, shoulder their burdens, be there for them. You know, you grow up and realize that your circle's important, but you need to grow beyond it, because life is not about yourself or your possessions or anything else. It's about helping other people and doing what's right by the grace of God and Jesus Christ. Yes, I'm a Christian. So that is the truth. That's not my truth. It's the truth. If you don't believe, then you're going to be in trouble. I'm sorry. It's the truth. I'm not going to deny it or say it's my, you know, this is what I believe. It's the truth. And that faith informs me to love people. And when I see Peter Parker making these sacrifices and saying, my Spider-Man, my life as Spider-Man is more important than, you know, my life as a happy kid, you know, where everything's all hunky-dory and flowers and rainbows and, you know, I get to remember everything and all the nostalgia. He's not living in the past. He's living for the present and the future. And all I'm going to say is this movie was in a tough spot. It had to fill the shoes of No Way Home, which is tough as it is, you know, tough enough as it is. But the question is, can it stand side by side with No Way Home as an incredible Spider-Man movie? Well, we're going to talk about it in this review now. So this movie kind of starts off where we left off, I think 5 years after, because they're, strangely enough, kind of following a timeline, you know, starting in 2008 from the original Iron Man. So the movie kicks off with Spider-Man is at his height. He is 100% focused, mission-driven. There's no distractions. He's not resting. He's bearing this burden on his own. He's really carrying that torch of responsibility. And he's confident, he's focused, he's ready. It seems like there's nothing wrong with him at the beginning of the movie, at the start. That changes shortly, but he's confidently dispatching thugs. He beats Tombstone. He beats a whole gang of ninjas. He defeats Scorpion. Like he's taking villains down left and right. He's working overtime. Gene DeWolf, character introduced, is a police commissioner. That's kind of his contact within the police, sort of like a Commissioner Gordon thing. Gene DeWolf, not to get sidetracked, was a love interest for Peter who got killed by some criminals. And it was another lesson for Peter, and the fact that, dragging people into this kind of crazy world of yours is going to get them killed. But in this, she's kind of not a mentor figure, but sort of his maternal substitute, his mom figure in a way, where she cares about him and says, you're kind of carrying this burden a bit too much, You need to sort of think about yourself sometimes. She's telling him, get some friends, get a hobby, have something to balance out the stress and, make things right, which is true. You do have to have a balance. You do have to have people you care about outside of work. You have to have close friends. You have to have a hobby. You have to have something to balance it out. You have to have family. But what's nice about it is he's still sticking to his vows. He's not giving it up, but the difference is he's making it toxic. He's bearing too much of this on his own shoulders. He's thinking he's the guy, he's got to do it. And, in terms of the heroics, yes, he does. There's no one else to bear the burden. And it's very much a well-written arc from the beginning. I love the way the CG scenes are. I love the web swinging. I love the acrobatics. I love the way that it's shot. It reminds me of, the old Spider-Man 3 game I played in 2007. It was well animated. It was slick. It was over the top. It was intense. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful game that was underrated. Spider-Man 3, seriously play it. I'm going to review it at some point on this channel. But this was something else. This showing like intro scene was well done. It established our characters. It established the stakes. And then we slowly start to see that Peter is struggling. He misses his friends. He misses MJ. He misses his support group that he used to have. He's visiting Aunt May's grave and thinking in his head, I got nobody. And he doesn't have anybody at all. And that's something that is very it's very interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. It shows that he's trying to shelter himself and bear this burden so no one has to suffer what he went through. But the thing is, he's not realizing, like we established before, that you don't necessarily have to do this alone. So, we see montages of him, seeing what happened to his friends and, watching his friends' lives without him. And we see he's much smarter. He's a genius. His technology is extremely advanced. He's grown beyond that kid we saw in Homecoming who needed help to build a suit and have AI and have everything handed to him on a platter. Like Edith, I think Edith was the first AI. I don't necessarily remember the name. It's been a long time, but we see that he's starting to see that he doesn't need some mentor figure to stay competent. Like, he doesn't need Tony Stark to give him technology because he's smart. He's Peter Parker. This is the guy in the comics who went on to form Parker Industries. So it's nice to see that his intelligence is being shown off, when in the previous movies he seemed clueless and kind of dim-witted in some ways, despite, still trying to do what's right, still being upstanding to a degree. And But with this, it's refreshing. He's competent and he's mature and he's ready. He's ready for whatever comes his way, but he doesn't realize that, you're not really ready emotionally. You're not stable. And we slowly get to see that happen as the story goes on. Like over the course of the story, we see that his abilities are changing as he's growing older. We see that his spider abilities are starting to take over and kind of surpass his human side. He's getting organic webbing, which thank God for organic webbing. He mentions Toby, and I was, super happy about that. The action is solid. Seeing Punisher was absolutely incredible. I loved seeing the Punisher. I loved the banter and the witty back and forth between them. Though I will say Punisher was a bit sanitized for this. We didn't get to see him kill anyone. Well, in a way, we didn't get to see him kill anyone. I would have preferred if he was more violent, more accurate to the gory Punisher from the show and the comics. I personally love Frank Castle. He is 100% within the right. Killing criminals is good. If someone's so evil that they're not willing to change, you kind of have to do what you got to do. And more than kind of, you do. But, him being in there, the conflict between them was fun. The banter was fun. The introduction of Jean Grey was absolutely incredible, though she did do some very morally bad things. She killed quite a few civilians and nearly murdered multiple people. It was interesting. The fact that she was one of the main quote unquote villains in quotation marks was fun. The mystery of, her taking people's bodies over and doing doing all this crazy mind stuff and doing mind games with Peter and trying to weaponize his guilt against him and make his life miserable. It's very interesting. Like she's good as a villain. I'm going to be honest. The animated series also showcased that she is good as a villain with the whole Phoenix arc. If you want a good example of that, watch the 90s cartoon, watch the Dark Phoenix saga, watch the whole thing, for crying out loud. It's absolutely incredible. Even X-Men Evolution did an episode where she kind of fell apart as a person, and they kind of had to bring her back to, her sanity because her powers were going nuts. But it was interesting that they kind of adapted the whole web cocoon resurrection thing from the comics, where Peter got his organic webbing because he was revived by, I think, a spider god of some type. It was a interesting thing. And then he gained all that, those extra crazy abilities. But I liked seeing Peter unhinged. I liked seeing his abilities, growing unhinged. He's trying to suppress these abilities. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. He doesn't want to let his powers grow into the next phase of life. The black eyes come through and he starts like tearing guys apart in the fight scenes. And it's absolutely incredible seeing him just let go and just beat the crap out of Scorpion because he's tired of this woman playing mind games with him. Because Jean's kind of evil in this. Like, she genuinely is. She's very malicious. Yes, her motivations for her whole, her sister are valid, but you don't need to drag cops into this or old women or... There's a lot of very morally ambiguous things she does, and sometimes outright evil things. She endangers a lot of people, kills a lot of people. She's a good actress. She's a great Jean Grey. It's weird that she's younger than Spider-Man. That's a bit odd. I would have been okay if she was just like an adult, like him, in college. That would have been preferable, but that's beside the point. Ned was kind of there. I'm just being honest. I don't care about Ned. I've never cared about him in any of these movies. He seemed to be getting like darker as a character in a way. Like, I thought with the whole fireball thing and the addictions he had, I thought it was going to lead into some kind of hobgoblin thing which would have been weird because, as an actor, you can't really take him too seriously, but it would have been an interesting twist to see that kind of materialize. But he seemed like he was getting more trendy, more confident, more cocky. Something's going on with him. There might be a character arc we have here where he's kind of, he's a bit of a hipster. And there's a bit of a rough edge. It seemed like the movie was insinuating that something was going on with him. And they kind of left that plot thread hanging, but that might have been intentional. And I'm interested to see where that goes. But the whole intrigue and mystery of who's doing this, I thought it was going to be the Controller for a second. He's an Iron Man villain, very obscure. If you play the Iron Man PC game or the PS2 version, you encounter him, and he's actually pretty interesting. He doesn't say too much, but he's kind of a menacing presence in that game. I feel like there's a lot of promise in this. The intro was really good. The kicking off of the story was interesting. The intrigue of who is this villain mind controlling people? Who's this person with this hood on? Why can't she get into Peter's mind? What's going on? Her having a sister, which did happen in the comics later, is canon. It's interesting. Like I said, I'm not going to complain about elements that are being added. Besides Ned, that's one element I could do without. But it was very well done. I really liked all the conflicts. I liked the kind of, Yelena being in the movie. And I liked her personality, her character, kind of seeing her be like, this is what you got to search for. This Emacs thing or VMAX or whatever. Why am I saying Emacs? Like it's Imagine. Dude, it's Emacs. No, VMAX. That's a real derp moment there for me where I don't understand something. It's VMAX. Which I might have to do some research with about VMAX because the real mutant the whole whatever they're called the whole organization that was the damage control is what they're called. I thought of the MRD, the Mutant Registration Division. They usually capture mutants and they threaten them, and they're led by Trask and Senator Kelly. That's usually who they're led by in most X-Men things. So it's weird not to see them here. But I feel like it would be a bit too obvious if it was them. Like if they're like, oh, this is Trask. Oh, this is... A lot of people would be like, okay, we know X-Men enough to know that this guy's suspicious. Or they said, oh, Stryker. Stryker did it. The guy from Wolverine who kind of messed with him. All that stuff. It's good they didn't fully pull from that, but I would like to see Stryker. I would like to see the MRD. I would like to see that conflict. The Brotherhood of Evil. I thought it was going to be the Brotherhood of Evil of mutants, but no, it's the MRD. But realistically, it's kind of like a mangled version of the MRD because the Mutant Registration Division doesn't want to weaponize mutants. They just want to exterminate them. That's all they want to do. All mutant kind they want to kill. There's no form of we want to weaponize their powers or use them for our own purposes. So it was kind of interesting that this, I would have liked to have known a little bit more about damage control. Like, are they supposed to be the MRD? Are they the new MRD? Is this like going to tie into X-Men? Are they going to come back? Are they going to make them the MRD? Are they going to put them in the story? That's what I would like to see. Like, what's going on here? People don't like mutants. That's the whole concept of these stories. It was weird to see people liking Spider-Man but disliking mutants because they're essentially the same thing. Like, Spider-Man, the animated series, kind of touched on that where it's like, oh, Spider-Man's just as hated as mutants are. So there's no difference. But then everything else is like, oh, Spider-Man's good, but he also sucks. But you know what? He's better than mutants. And it's like, what? what does that even mean? Like, how is Spider-Man better than mutants? But that's beside the point. I liked the hatred towards the mutants. I liked the flashback scene with Jean Grey and her sister. The banter was good. You know, the dialogue was touching. It was heartwarming. The whole scene where MJ is, you know, being, you know, kissing Peter, and it's actually Jean faking him out and then almost dropping MJ off a cliff as Peter's choking MJ was well done. It was dark. It was gritty. It was no holds barred. It felt like, you know, okay, the story is really kicking up a notch. His eyes are getting black. I was thinking, man, this is reminding me of Hollow Ichigo from Bleach, where he comes out when things get serious, you know, when crap hits the fan. And I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. You know, are they trying to do a little symbiote tie-in? And no, but they're doing a Secret Wars. The ending of this movie and I'm jumping all over the place, but the mid portion of the movie, though, was about him struggling with his powers. He meets Bruce Banner. You know, for once, Bruce Banner acts like Bruce Banner. He's like, oh, I want to suppress these problems with my powers. You know, I'm frustrated. And Banner, you know, he has a suppressant on him to suppress the Hulk because he can't control him still. And, you know, the whole conflict of Hulk is still in there. Somehow it's better told than 90% of the MCU Hulk movie appearances. And it's just, it's absolutely incredible. Like, Bruce Banner is acting like Bruce Banner. He's smart, he's witty, but he's also scared. He doesn't trust himself, and he's teaching a class. You know, he's a respected teacher for what he did. It makes sense. Personally, I would like him to be hated, but that's just me. I'm a purist with the character. But he's like, oh, I have a suppressor. You know, this suppresses the Hulk. And it keeps him under control. So it kind of reveals, like, Professor Hulk was not just I'm assuming not just a perfect union between the two. It was more of a Band-Aid of sorts, where he put that device on to suppress Hulk, and then you get Professor Hulk. And then Peter's like, oh, can you help me with this? You know, can you help me? I need to know this. My name's Ned Leeds, because he's not telling Hulk for some reason, even though it doesn't really matter if Bruce Banner knows or not, whether he's Spider-Man or not. I mean, I don't understand how that applies. I can understand not wanting your friends to know because they're just normal people and they'll get themselves killed if they do know. So there's a conflict there. It makes sense. And in fact, logically, you wouldn't reintroduce your friends into your life. You would as Peter, but you wouldn't do it as Spider-Man. So it's just, it's interesting. I enjoy that, you know, Banner's like, you know, do you really want to suppress this? You know, there are some things you can be selective and stuff and suppress stuff, but do you really want to suppress your abilities to a degree? Do you really want to say, oh, I can't let that out, that rage and that passion, and, you know, let my powers go to the next stage? You know, he can't go to the next stage of being a spider, an adult. You know, he wants to suppress that. And the thing is, he's like, no, you don't want to suppress that. You know, that's wrong. You need to let yourself grow as a person. You know, you can't hold back. You got to take the good with the bad. You know, the bad can be tempered. The bad can be, you know, focused. The bad can be gotten rid of. But, you know, you need to learn and grow. You know, your abilities are going to change and you're going to struggle with it. But you shouldn't get rid of this. This isn't your thing. You can't do that. You can't just say, oh, I want to get rid of all the bad things in my life instantly so I won't struggle anymore. No, you figure out how to deal with the bad things and then you grow stronger because of it. That's something that's cool about it, is that it's a character arc. We have a character arc. We have a trajectory, and the writers have finally taken him seriously as a character. Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Bruce Banner in one movie. You know, it's not just Avengers 1 and 2 and Incredible Hulk where he's taken seriously. It's here too. Like he's a character. He's not just a guy, a kid running around in a little play suit from Party City. He's an actual hero now. And that's what makes this movie so good. And honestly, to see that conflict of, I want to suppress my powers. I'm also dealing with the Punisher, which adds stress. Because him and I don't agree methods wise. We're friends, and the conflict of, I want to see my friends again and get into their lives and blah, blah. And the whole, not blah, blah. These are really good elements, but, he has this conflict with the Punisher. Can I work with him? Can I trust him? I don't agree with his methods. And then he has the trouble of dealing with his friends and the fact that he can't really put himself in their lives. He wants to reintroduce himself. He wants to have the life that he had before, the friendships that he had. But he also knows that if he does let them in, they could die. It's a tale as old as time for Spider-Man. It's since Spider-Man 1, it's a case of, what do I do? Do I let these people in? Do I let them go? I still hang out with them. You don't have to get rid of them, but do I let my desires for them, and their own desires for me dictate what I do? And it's like, no. Spider-Man 1 was very clear on that. You don't do that. The other two movies betrayed that philosophy, which I don't agree with, but I still think they're absolutely incredible. But the thing is, it's interesting. The story's not saying, what I like about this story is it's not saying that you have to isolate yourself from your friends. That's the opposite of what you should do, your family, the people that care about you. But what it really means is, you have to have a support group to rely on emotionally, physically, spiritually. For me, that's my church. That's the people in my house. That's Jesus Christ. It's God. Those, most importantly, those two. Those are the things that keep me getting up every morning. Those are the things that keep me happy and focused and ready. And they make me feel loved. They get me through. I need a guiding star. I need a North Star. I need a compass. And I can't get through it with just people. I have to use, I need something more. And everybody needs something more. And you need the people in your life. And in my opinion, and I believe this is the truth, it's not even my opinion, this is the truth, you need Jesus and God. But, you don't have to agree with that. But it's the truth, and you can deny it all you want. But if you don't agree with it, then your life's going to be terrible, and you're gonna not go to heaven. But sermon aside, which I don't apologize for. I'm not going to make an apology for telling people what I believe, and or not even what I believe, what I know to be true. This is the truth, and I'm going to say it. But the thing is, this has been very rambling, and I apologize. The thing is, this is a story about a guy being pushed to his limit and bearing too much on his shoulders. And I've been there. And sometimes I still go there. You take too much on yourself. You put too much on yourself, or too little. Like, you don't want to do that. You want to be in the center where you put just enough on yourself, but you also rely on other people. You need something. You need that support system in your life, whether it's your friends or your family or your wife or your husband, or your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or your friends. Like, you need that stuff, because if you don't have it, you're going to fall apart. It's, being isolated is not a good thing. And that's something that I thoroughly enjoy about this. It's not hokey or stupid. It's real. It's real about it. It's not just like, the power of friendship. They're not helping him fight. The only people helping him fight, or the only person helping him fight, is Frank Castle, the Punisher. And that's something that's good. It's showing that, these normal people don't need to be dragged into this conflict. Frank actually knows how to protect himself. They don't. It's selling really hard, the whole romance thing, where it's like, you need to. The problem I have is, this is one problem I have with this movie. But first, let's continue with the praises. The villains, the damage control are interesting. I loved the twist that was getting obvious, but I liked the twist where, they were the bad guys. Peter was bamboozled. He's still a little naive. He trusts people a little too much. He takes their word a little too literally. Especially someone who's like connected with the government. It was, Yelena was funny. Her giving him like the whole, sit in the hot tub thing and, figure out what's going on in life. That was cool. I liked that. And her saying, you need to be with people. You need to have a support system. Even she's telling him that. Every person in his life is telling him that. She's being snarky, sarcastic, what I wanted from the actual Black Widow. And then she points him to damage control. And then, all this stuff starts falling into like chaos. He's passing out sometimes from all his powers kind of getting out of control. He's trying to find a way to control it. His emotions are screwing him up majorly. His isolation, his loneliness, everything is making him fall apart. And his powers are evolving, and he's growing, and he's changing, and he's struggling. And it's absolutely incredible. This is something that Spider-Man stories are absolutely the best at, is showing a man being pushed to his limits, but also being able to get back up because of the people he cares about and the duty he has to the city. Like, those things go hand in hand. He's protecting the city because, you don't just help people that you know. You don't just help people that you love. You help everybody. You help every single person. In terms of if they have trouble, you lift that, you help that old lady across the street. You pick up the woman's groceries who dropped her groceries. You help the old man carry something on your back. Maybe he needs to, at the store, you need to pick up the salt bag and put it in the car for him. Like, you help people. And that's something that's powerful in small ways, and that means something to people. And that's something that this movie sold really well is, the people are appreciative of what Spider-Man's doing. They really care about him. They're starting to like him. He's competent. He's selfless. He's showing that his life is a life of sacrifice, but it's also a life of, improving other people's lives. Ned, it's not about being like, oh, I need to be near Ned and MJ all the time. I need to stay with them. They're demanding that I don't do these sacrifices. I'm glad the whole memory loss thing was permanent. I'm glad it was consistent. They didn't just remember immediately. MJ really didn't get to a moment in this story where she's like, oh, I love you. Like, it was barely even close to that. There was a little bit of something, but it wasn't a full I love you. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't any of that stuff. They didn't do the cop-out. They said, you know what, these stakes are permanent. The previous movie is beloved. It will always be beloved, and we're not going to step on its toes. And that is something that is good. And to see the bad guy, I was hoping that Jean Grey would kill that bad guy. I don't know how they accelerated her powers or evolved her DNA, but I think it was probably supposed to be like a parallel to Spider-Man. She's holding herself back or blah, blah, blah. And they were, kind of ripping the chain off, the inhibitor, as it were. And I liked that. I enjoyed that that aspect where it's like, oh, it's a parallel between the two. It was a bit random and came out of nowhere, but I thought they were doing a Cerebro tease saying, oh, you can expand your mind. We're working on a project. Because Cerebro is used by Professor X to kind of expand his mind control powers or his telepathy. He can reach across the entire planet or probably galaxies with Cerebro's help. He's already powerful, but he needs an amplifier. So I assumed they were doing a Cerebro thing. But no. I do wonder what that project is supposed to be. I'm eager to see what it is. Obviously, that stuff is interesting. Jean Grey's sister gets killed. That's also comic book accurate. She does not survive. She's killed by some humans. Um, she's not alive. She also has in the comics she has dormant mutant powers, so she doesn't just immediately, and she's like a telepath. It's more of a gradual thing where she learns she's a mutant, but still, it's very much a case of, the story's moving. We're cooking with gas. Everything's going forward. It's intense. It's dramatic. It's incredible. This movie is so good. I'm going to be honest here. It is good. It stands side by side with No Way Home. No Way Home surpasses it because of the other two Spider-Men and the conflict and the drama and the sacrifice. But this is incredible. It's up there with the original trilogy with me. I love this movie. The only problem is sanitized Punisher, where he's too weak and he can't really do anything. He can't kill people. He can't be brutal. All he can do is swear and kind of be the buddy guy, kind of grandpa Punisher. And I am glad he was there. He was well acted. He was well done. He was just sanitized, and I didn't like that. Frank Castle should be violent. He should be deadly. He should be focused. He shouldn't have to be censored for the sake of kids. Violence happens in life. It's something that I don't like across the MCU. I never liked the suppressing of the violence. These comic books get extremely graphic. Usually, all of Thanos's kills are proof of that in the actual Infinity War saga, the actual Infinity Gauntlet comics in the 90s. He shatters Thor like glass. He kills Spider-Man with a single punch. He kills freaking Captain America with he kills Spider-Man with a stone. He punches Captain America once and kills him instantly. He beheads Iron Man. There's a lot of stuff here that's intense. He melts Wolverine's skeleton. It's not holding back because Thanos is a threat, but he has to be sanitized because of censors and all that stuff. We can't have actual stakes or horrific consequences. And I still think those two movies are good. Don't get me wrong. Endgame and Infinity War are great, but I would love to see them take the chains off and just let things be as they were. And Punisher is a great example of the fact that they should have done that. Seeing Hulk finally be Hulk, not Professor Hulk, was really cool. Seeing him do all that stuff, seeing him, fall apart and get angry and be frustrated and, actually threaten Spider-Man. I'm glad Spidey didn't defeat him. That would have been absolutely awful to see Hulk get beaten by Spider-Man. Even if Spider-Man's one of my favorite characters, he can't beat Hulk. That's literally impossible. Hulk was given respect in this movie. He was treated as a rage monster, as tough and terrifying, and it was very well written. And Jean Grey was malicious and evil, and I enjoy it to a degree, but I almost wish there was a bit more of an innocent angle to her, so she wasn't as ruthless and evil. There's a lot of evil in her. Professor X, he's going to have to do a lot of work on her, and I hope and pray he's going to be in the X-Men movie because you can't have one without him. I also hope and pray that he shuts her brain off. Well, no, he cut that out, but I think he, no offense, but you might have to shut her brain off since she killed all those people. I understand Jean Grey. She was sympathetic. I liked Peter using his empathy to defeat her. It was very symbolic of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. A lot of this stuff, people don't realize that a lot of this stuff, the organic webbing, the empathy, the frustrations with being alone, the trouble he has with girls, all this stuff is very Tobey Maguire-esque. And that's what I like. And they even bring up Peter too. It's kind of this is very much carrying forward those themes of a man, having to go against all odds and be like, I can do this. I need people to help me, to be my support group. I need these people in my life and I'm going to fight for them, but I'm also going to let them give me peace and love and joy. And I think that's something this movie showcased in spades. And I think I liked the Barrett 50 cal shot that, Spider-Man took, the dramatic fall down that was kind of like Aunt May, him protecting Jean Grey and, shielding her from that shot. I loved Peter Parker, just falling to the ground and going to the hospital. And it's like, oh, is he going to die? This or that. And then, what happens? He survives. Because you're not going to freaking replace Peter Parker with another character. You're not going to replace him with Miles Morales. I'm sorry, Spider-Verse fans. I'm sorry, Miles fans, however few you are, replacing especially comic book Miles Morales. The only reason why people like Miles Morales as a character is because of Spider-Verse, and that's it. Comic book Miles Morales is just a crappy version of Peter Parker, a crappy replacement. But anywho, Miles rant aside, it was nice to see Peter just be like, oh, I'm going to sacrifice myself. He shows her, let yourself be loved, Jean. You're not a freak. You're special. Don't view your don't view your mutant abilities as bad. Those are beautiful things. They're a beautiful part of you. Don't suppress that part of you. That's who you are. And he was told, I'm Spider. She told him, you're Spider-Man. You're not Peter Parker. You're Spider-Man. Peter says, I'm both. And it's like, yes, you are. And I liked that. And I loved the scene where he let go on those frickin' ninjas. It was the coolest thing of all time. Seeing Peter finally just let go, be brutal, be tough. He's got restraint, but he's also really strong. He's punching stun sticks in half into like pieces. He's disarming villains and like sending electric shockwaves back at other villains, punching the crap out of people, throwing them around. And then he webs every single person up in the sky. And then it's beautiful. Spider-Man is finally Spider-Man. He's finally who he's supposed to be. And that's the best part about this. He's Spider-Man now. Tom Holland's Peter is Spider-Man. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He's become Spider-Man. There's no self-doubt. There's nothing. At this point, he's realized I can have my friends, and without my friends, I would be miserable. And him going back to them in the apartment before this, it was nice. It was nice seeing them, have chemistry. Him and Ned having fun. For once, a scene with Ned, I personally don't think he even needs to be there, but a scene with him and Ned feels like they're actually friends. They're not just goofy friends. This is the goofy fat friend stereotype. He's actually bonding with him and he's bonding with MJ. Like, it feels real. It feels like the Raimi trilogy. This feels like a Raimi Spider-Man movie, like the original trilogy. And that's what's good about it. It looked at what Raimi did and it said, let's do that again. Every single conflict, it looked at what the comics did and said, we're doing that again. And that's something that in the animated series and all these adaptations, it's trying to pay respect to them. It's not just saying we're the new cool hip Spider-Man. We don't need that old guy stuff, responsibility, blah, blah. Spider-Man Homecoming and No Way and Far From Home, told the opposite message. They're like, oh, this is, that's old fashioned Spider-Man. It's for old people. We got to cater to the new generation that, scrolls around on their phones and doesn't pay attention and, doesn't care about responsibility. It's all about, hey, where's my friends? Can I hang out with them all the time? It's easy. That's something that I didn't like about it. What I like about this is, Peter bonds with Punisher. He bonds with Banner again. Like, he's not leaving his circle cloistered. In the other movies, he was, strictly about the people in his life that were important to him. But in this movie, he's selfless and he cares about everyone in New York. He expands it to law enforcement, to DeWolf. He expands it. He's even nice to the freaking damage control people in the beginning. Like, he cares about everybody. He's not selective on who he cares about or what he cares about. He actually cares about every single person. He's not selective with who, his life is about, because you never know. Like that's something that's refreshing. He feels like a person. He feels like he's upstanding. You know, he's doing the right thing. He's flawed, but he's doing it. He's not whining about how bad his life is. And that's refreshing. He's not trying to take the easy way out. The thing is, he's just suppressing his potential because he's afraid his potential is too dangerous when it's not. Yeah, even MJ's telling him, hey, you know, why are you suppressing part of yourself? You know, why are you saying this is so bad? Why are you saying, you know, like, why are you trying to make yourself weaker? Why are you taking this aspect of your life? Why are you looking at your weaknesses and saying, you know, I can't rise above these, I have to get rid of them? Like, you can't do that. You can rise above them. You can become better at dealing with them. But throwing them to the wayside, you can't just do that. You know, you trust that. For me, it's trusting that God will help me with my weaknesses, my sins, my failures. And that's something that gets me through life. You know, I'm not as selfish today. I'm not as possessive. I'm not as frustrated. I'm not idolizing things. Like, that is an inspiring element of this character, is I see these elements where it's like, you know, he's got a lot of pent up rage and frustration. But he's like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get rid of this because that's not possible. I can't do this on my own. Like, I can't deal with these emotions and frustrations. And you really see him fall apart. You know, he's getting headaches. He's barely able to control his powers. He's frustrated with the situation. You know, he's growing up. He's gaining more responsibilities. He doesn't know how to deal with them. But finally, at the end, he gets it. And he tells Jean, you know, don't let yourself, you know, sometimes people are going to hate you, but don't let that get you down. Keep on fighting. Keep on doing what's right. You know, I care about you. I love you. Other people might not, but I do. Like, he loves her, you know, as, you know, because he just sees a kid who's tormented. So he's like, you know what? Nobody loved you as like as a person. I'm going to love you as a person. You know, I'm going to care about you. And that's something that was powerful about this movie. You know, he cares. And that's the hallmark of a good character. Like, that's good writing 101. You show someone grow up, you know, he cares about Jean. And Punisher, you know, he shot Peter, but you see his connection at the end. You know, Punisher feels bad for shooting Peter. You see the dynamics between them. He says, you know, you're a good kid, you know. People care about you, and you have a good life, and you have stuff that's, you know, you got a good thing going for you, and you have my respect. You know, you have balls, and you see him there crying, and he's like caring about Peter, and it's such a good scene. Now, him being sanitized, like I said, not good, but you know, and he puts the mask on and pretends he's Spider-Man so Peter can leave and get away from the crowd. And it was kind of a fun little, you know, gag, but also it was charming and enjoyable, and it was clever, and it fit Frank's character. And it just, you know, he's telling Peter, I've never met anyone like you. It's nice to have someone who's good and kind and respectful. He's not just, you know, you're not just some hardened, gritty person. You're actually a person who cares, who has empathy and compassion. And that is something that I like about this story. It's incredible. And seeing that ending scene where he's, you know, he's finally able to rest and relax. He's able to recuperate. And you know, seeing all those people praise him and be nice to him and say, you know what, you're a good guy. You're nice. You're kind. You're humble. You don't let this get to your head. That's what's incredible about this story, is Peter stays a humble kid. He stays that boy from Queens, you know, who suffered all those terrible things. Now, I'm still not happy about Uncle Ben not being there. I wish Jean Grey would be called out for killing people. That is something that I would change. Ned, to me, feels like a nothing character. Even what slight arc that he was going to be given was taken away. I enjoyed the ending where, you know, him and Ned reconnect and he remembers Peter's name. I enjoy that, Peter figures out, wait a minute, maybe, this isn't a permanent effect. Maybe I can find a way to get them to remember. The thing is, he struggles to get there. If he had just instantly got them back, it would be terrible. And him not getting Mary Jane to remember him was great. It worked. It worked that, she didn't remember who he was. It was tragic, but it was also like, it worked. And that's something, and they didn't undo what the previous movie did. They didn't just say, oh, this is too sad, let's move on. It's something that they just said, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this. This is the story. We're not going to change anything. We're not going to step on the toes of the people that made the previous movie, the writers or the directors or the producers or all those people. We're going to honor what they did, and they did it in spades. They did an incredible job. The movie's a 9.5 out of 10. It is so good. I was shocked that it was this good. I loved seeing Hulk, Punisher, and Spider-Man interacting. I loved that little dynamic they had. Hulk's obviously not dead because him falling under a bunch of rubble is not going to kill him, obviously. That would be the dumbest thing of all time. I was kind of hoping they were going to go to an angle where it's like, oh, Bruce Banner is the Hulk, and, because he's the Hulk, he wants to suppress the Hulk, but it's not right for him to do that. Like, he needs to become Hulk fully, like Spider-Man, Peter needs to become Spider-Man fully in the aspect of he needs to mature and let his powers grow and stop suppressing his growth. That's something that works, you could have made some interesting parallels there, but you can feel bad for Jean Grey. I don't blame her for wanting to kill those people. And she was well written. Her scenes with her sister were good. And the whole movie just worked. It worked. I enjoyed it. I loved the Secret Wars tease at the end with the Spidey tracker thing. It doesn't make any sense that Ned can somehow track someone all the way into outer space. But for me, like, this movie was really good. It's not my favorite Spider-Man movie, but it's up there with the trilogy. I love Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. Sue me. I'm a purist in that area. I love those movies. Nothing will be better than them. I like Amazing Spider-Man 1. No Way Home is absolutely incredible. This movie is really incredible. All this, those are good movies for Spider-Man. I love them. Spider-Man animated series, easily my favorite. Shattered Dimensions Noir. I love him in that. I love his personality, his voice. This character is incredible. I love animated series Spider-Man. All these versions of these characters are the peak of the characters. There's nothing else that could be as good. And that's something, and this is up there. It stands up there with them tall and proud as a good movie. A really, really good movie. Like, it's great. I was expecting it to be terrible because I thought they were going to go away from all the stuff that happened, all the tragedy. They're like, reverse it, get rid of it, classic Marvel style, downplay it with humor. And they didn't do that. The humor was actually funny in this movie. The action was tightly shot and well directed, and the CG looked incredible, and the acrobatics and all that stuff, and the way the scenes were shot, and the color grading and the special effects and the literally everything. The music was interesting. I didn't care for the little lo-fi remix at the end of the Spider-Man thing where he's laying down by the sunset on top of that building, and MJ's looking in his direction, kind of signifying that she does remember a little. But I feel like, for me, I'm sorry, I enjoy jazz, I enjoy lo-fi stuff, but I don't think that fits Spider-Man unless you're doing a noir thing. Like, jazz, all this stuff doesn't fit. It doesn't. And I feel like, it's just not very good to me. The rest of the soundtrack was good. I'm not a big fan of the main theme personally for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I never really cared for it. A Raimi theme, Reign Supreme, animated series theme, Reign Supreme. But it was really good. The movie was good. Besides the elements I listed, Jean Grey being kind of weird, Punisher being sanitized, freaking the fact that my brain is getting foggy, but probably because I'm, it's 12:25 a.m. and I'm still dealing with my allergies. They're literally terrible. But really, those critiques where it's like, oh, I don't enjoy Ned. I don't like Jean Grey killing people. I don't really like the whole lo-fi remix. Sanitized Punisher is not fun. Ned being a douche and it not really going anywhere, where he's like a hipster, that doesn't go anywhere, where he's like getting addicted to like either an energy drink or something. Brain's foggy there. It's just, they're having a frat party. There's no form of follow up on this. There's no follow up on how bad it is in that area. Flash Thompson, I think, kissed MJ, and she's like frustrated with him, and he barely has any impact on the story, which is weird because Flash Thompson's pretty integral to Peter's growth. He starts to become friends with Flash, and starts to help him, and he grows as a character. Both of them do. Excuse me. But it's very interesting. It's a great movie. I would recommend watching it. It's faithful to Spider-Man as a whole. I like the messages it brings in terms of the conflicts that Peter has and how he solves them. I like the empathy he has towards others, including Jean and mutant kind and all that stuff. He proves he's mentally stronger than Jean is because he has a center. The X-Men tease is good. I'm eager to see what they do. I'm eager to see what they do with X-Men, with the whole X-Men tease. It's a well-written movie. I would recommend watching it. It's very, very good. It's an incredible movie. I fully recommend. I was very cynical about it coming in. I was frustrated with the fact that they'd probably reverse all the twists. They'd make it real easy at the beginning. She'd remember and blah, blah, blah. They'd be like, oh, Ned and MJ are remembering and everything's okay and hunky-dory and all that stuff. And I was like, no, please don't do that. And they didn't do it. And that is something that is admirable. They stuck to their guns for the most part. And that's something that, Disney usually never does. It's probably because Sony's involved with this, and they made, the Tobey Maguire stuff and the part of the Andrew Garfield stuff, all of it. I'm not going to say part of it, but they did a good job. Well done, people. God bless people. Christ is King, and see ya 2 weeks from now.